Good evening. Welcome to our Tuesday night podcast. I'm glad you're joining us. Pastor Ford is back in action.
All right.
And we get a full-on wide view right away. That's not usually how that goes, is it? Anyway, tonight we're going to talk about discipleship, but as always, we welcome you to join us in this conversation and ask questions. Some people like to throw comments up. Sometimes they're relevant, sometimes they're not, and welcome anyway. Throw your questions in. We want to make this an opportunity for everybody to be able to ask questions that maybe you wouldn't have the opportunity to, whether an in-person setting out on the streets, you're talking to somebody, maybe you heard about this church for the first time, you received a flyer or something like that, or somebody told you about this podcast. We're glad you're joining us, but the whole point of this is so that you can literally just be free to ask questions and pick Pastor Ford's brain. And he's got a lot of experience behind him. He's worked with a lot of different types of people. And so it's a good opportunity for you to get answers to questions that maybe you've been thinking about for a while. So anyway, tonight, why disciple? And that is, it's a question for a pastor specifically. We could talk to disciples and we could talk to people who have thought about being disciples, and we could go through all kinds of different, reasons why somebody would become a Christian. But being a pastor is almost, it's like a step further into calling. And not calling specifically, but discipleship. It's almost like you're now the disciple maker. It's no longer, it's what you have. I'm going to give my life to making disciples. I'm going to teach men. I'm going to call men. I'm going to tell men, follow me, look at my example. And not every Christian holds themselves to that standard. And definitely not every Christian feels that that's something they're called to do, which we've talked about before actually is the broad calling of every Christian. But pastors have set themselves aside for that. And so after, you've been a pastor for like 30 years, right? Is that actually 30 years, or is it?
Pretty close. Quick math. 1993, so 27.
25 years, yeah. So you have
28.
Been a pastor for longer than you were not a Christian.
Yes.
Yeah. So
you
got saved at 21, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, and we've talked about your testimony many times, but I've got to ask some just blunt questions, because being a pastor that long, and you've pastored in different countries, you've pastored different churches, different cultures, different ways of thinking, mindsets. And the first question I have to ask is, why? And don't give me like you can easily say, well, this is what I'm called to do. I get that, but maybe go a little deeper. And the reason why is because as I was thinking about this, I've been putting a lot of thought into this topic, actually, mainly to try and just be transparent. Like, what is it you're doing, and why are you doing it? What would drive you to do this for 30 years? The scripture that I was kind of pulling from for this is 1 Timothy 3. It's like the classic discipleship scripture. If a man desires the office of a bishop, which is talking about an overseer or the leader of the people, in the Catholic Church, they are kind of the shot callers, as it were, the priests, the head honchos. They're the ones. But he says a man who desires the office. He doesn't say if a man's called to the office. He said if a man desires the office. So first question is, what would make you desire that office?
So you've asked me a couple of questions altogether here. So I'm
giving you like the context of the total questioning, but then the specific question is, what would make you desire this?
Okay. So that's good. So let's start there. That was the issue. I do know men, my other son-in-law being one of them, that really struggle with the idea of, am I called? And am I up to the job? And a lot of those kinds of things. I don't know the exact why behind this, but when I got saved, when I started to get an idea of what was going on, it was really shocking to me getting saved. I mean, it was a real shock to my existence. And that probably has a lot to do with it. Whereas my other son-in-law, Anthony, he grew up in church. And so growing up in church, by the time he gets old enough to actually start thinking about the reality of calling and things like that, was probably a little bit more sober than mine was. Because for me, it just seemed like the chance of a lifetime. And I will readily admit that in the beginning, it was all about me. I mean, it really was. It was, I had gotten saved, and I knew that it was a revelation that what I've been trying to achieve with my life is Christianity, on my own, trying to make something of myself. That was always the thing. I grew up my dad was a very, accomplished individual. Anything he set himself to do, he could achieve. And so I was already on that road of, I'm going to be something. I'm going to do something with my life. But it seemed like it didn't matter what I tried. There was nothing in it that had any real sense of importance. It was like, I did it. It was like big deal kind of thing. And where becoming a Christian, it was like, this is what changes the world. And then begin to read the Gospels, specifically reading the Gospels and realizing, wow, this is the only thing that's important, that there isn't anything more important. Jesus and these 12 guys, in an obscure place in the world, getting ready to change the entire course of humanity. And so it was a very powerful thing. And so the desire came out of that. It was like, I want to be a part of that, and understanding that the first 12 were not the only, and that God had been raising up over the years. And so it definitely was, I did feel called, but I cannot remember a time when I didn't desire. It was always there, the desire. So the calling, I mean, it was, when I talk about this, there wasn't much time in between. We're talking weeks, not long periods of time where I wanted to do this. And so when I first got sent out, there was, which was 10 years after. So there was a lot of period of time there, 10 years of desire, 10 years of wanting to go change the world and have influence. But it was more about what I was going to do. It didn't take on an individual meaning until after I had actually gone and I went to England. And so while I was in England, that's when it became more about other people and not about me. Because the first few years were very frustrating, because it was a eye opener as to how people could come from such a messy background and come into the kingdom of God and not want to do what I'm doing. Just seem to be that, I'm happy, with my salvation, and let's just make this about me and my little world. And it was very, very frustrating, because it's like, how in the world can you not have an understanding that, what your life could be? And in a sense, we were in the same space, in the same place, selfish. It's just that my selfishness was wanting to reach people for Jesus, not because I cared about them, but because I cared about Jesus, and I cared about and what happened to my life. And there was this incredible motivation that if you will do what I did, you can be like me. So the whole thing was really super selfish. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about what God has for your life and your purpose. It's that what God has for my life and for my purpose, you need to do the same thing. So it was more gathering people inside of myself than it was trying to help people to get into their calling and the purpose of God for their lives. But that very quickly evaporated when I realized that people didn't want that. They didn't want to be me. They didn't want to be little me's. And it was like, I can't understand why you wouldn't want to be a little me, because my life's wonderful, and it's amazing. And what God was doing in my life, the miracles, the opportunities, leaving the country, leaving the United States, going to another country, all these opportunities and stuff. And I thought, if you start to think like I think, it won't be long before you can do the same thing, and thinking this is just the most incredible thing in the world. And so it was selfish, but spiritual selfish. I don't know how to actually, try to clarify that anymore, because it wasn't just this selfish, self-centered, it's all about me, from the standpoint that this is about, me and my glory, as much as my experience being reproduced in other people. But it was about me and reproducing that. I could care less what they had to think about any of this. It was just get with the program so that you can get this and stop asking stupid questions. So out of that, over time, it began to get more personal when I would, people who were just really trashed out and had, my life wasn't, I hadn't burned a lot of bridges before I got saved. And so for me, there wasn't a whole lot. I didn't have any kids in my life. I hadn't gotten anybody pregnant. I wasn't married. So I didn't have a lot of irreversible situations that would have to come with me into this new life. I literally could erase my old life 100%. Nothing carried over. Nothing needed to carry over. There was a few debts and things like that were easily settled, but nothing major. And including my criminal record, even my criminal record kind of dropped off, even though it was a bit crazy. God did a couple of miracles and it was all fixed and there was no more. But so that's kind of how it was in the beginning. It was really about my calling, my influence, my. I mean, good attributes, but mine. And then probably, I don't know, maybe a couple of years into it, I really started to really hunger to want to see people just get saved. It was like, okay, fine, maybe I'm not going to send people out the first few years of our church. Maybe it's going to be a while before that happens, but I just want to at least get people saved. And there was it kind of cycling out. People would come in, they'd be in for a little period of time, and then they'd leave, and there wasn't real traction. And it really became a hunger to want to just help people. And then over the years, that just began to multiply, to the point to where it was like, I just want to get people saved. It was like, it took that period of time and all that frustration of not having the response where I began to develop a heart like Jesus for people and just to help people where they were, and seeing people healed and seeing people saved and those kinds of things without having to have them get on the discipleship path. And so it wasn't so much the idea of wanting to disciple people, it was more about trying to get them to just understand what God had for their lives. Mm-hmm. So I would say that was the real motivation after a while, and has been ever since. I mean, as much as I would love to do those other things, actually I have to go the other way now, because sometimes it's just like, what, I don't even have a vision for sending out churches, because it's like, oh, this is just never going to happen. I don't see anybody that really has that kind of hunger or that kind of appetite to actually genuinely want to get sent out. So it's like, okay, well, we'll just work on, development and that kind of a thing. But I have to keep, which we have our conferences, which is always good to keep coming back to that original thing that God does want to raise up men to send them out. So what,
again, going back to the scripture, it says, he who desires the office of a bishop desires a good thing. What makes this a good thing? What makes it like a standout good thing?
Well, I think that's where the cause of my initial problem is the understanding that God really does put a premium on people of influence. You see this all through the Bible. God is really grooming people for influence. The first king, and then David afterwards, man after God's own heart, and a lot of his, he became the standard, for all kings after that. And he's a man of character, influence. He had his problems, but always a heart for God and the desire to see God glorified, and God's glorified through the reproduction of his influence through an individual. And so it was a lot of that, just a lot of the understanding that, and in the Tucson church at the time, there was a lot of people in the church wanting to do the same thing. So there was a culture as well. It was a culture of desiring to want to be pastors. Mm-hmm.
So what about the reward for the idea of being? We live in the Bay Area. It's easy to it's easy to chase something when there's something to be chased. You know what I mean? Is this just like, is disciple making? I'm sticking to this idea of disciple making because that's kind of what pastors have set themselves aside to do. But what is the thing that would or should attract people to the calling or the office of a pastor from the outside? Or is it
from
something,
not being a Christian?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well,
If there is at all.
the secular equivalent is motivational speakers. There's a very similar dynamic of motivational. When I say motivational speakers, I'm using that in a very broad term because there are CEO coaches and things like that, that are people who just help people to be the best that they can be, and that would be kind of the secular version of discipleship. And it's interesting. Tony Robbins actually made that statement about that. He said the most rewarding thing in all of life is helping somebody else, and he's not coming from the point of a, spiritual or, Christian or anything like that. It's just simply his experience as a motivational speaker of the joy that you get out of, helping people, to become, the best version of themselves that they can be. There really is a genuine reward for that. And when that spills over into salvation, there really isn't anything better. I mean, I knew this even as just a member of the congregation. The more people that I worked with that came into the church, when those people would get saved, and that's what inspired my kids to want to go on to be saved and to live for God. As they got older, as they see these people come in and their lives are a bit jacked up, and then they would get saved, and then God would help them put their lives together, and then they would begin to turn around and help other people. And they could see this sort of momentum that was happening in our church of people helping people. And there's it's what makes a dead thing alive, and I'm talking really, if a church is dead or a person's experience in church is dead and they're interested in making that alive, well, it's very easy. You just start working with people. Forget about the frustrations, forget about the failures, forget about the people that don't actually begin to respond. But you just keep doing that, and it won't be long, and you'll reach somebody, and then that will begin to happen, and that is a lifelong thing. Just reaching one person, seeing that person convert, it becomes a lifelong source of personal satisfaction. Mm-hmm. Even if it's just one person, and so then it becomes 1 and 2 and 3 and more, and over time, and then you begin to see sort of a development of multiple people like this. And sometimes in the dark moments of life, when life your expectations aren't being met, you can think back and think, well, I reached this person, I reached that person, I helped this person, and those things become sort of stabilizers that keep you from becoming discouraged, with your current situation.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Kay, I actually read your question and forgot about it. So she asked a little while ago, when did you begin caring? You kind of answered the question, which is why I didn't actually think about it again. But maybe you can just reiterate it real quick.
Yeah, well, that was, the caring. The caring part, when you just use the word caring, that was always there. The issue, and that's why I said it's hard to articulate it, because the issue wasn't a fact of never caring. It was, how come you cannot see, what a wonderful thing this is, and be like me, that's what I mean. Is that was the beginning, and the real shift really was, how come you can't see what you can become? In the beginning, it was all about my personality, my wants, my likes and dislikes, and all that being projected on. Everybody should want to be like this. To making that a more personal. So it wasn't an issue of there was a caring or a lack of caring that had to develop over time. There was always a care. I mean, from day one, I've mentioned it before. I literally went to my job the next day after I became a Christian, and unashamedly began to share with every single person who would listen to me about Jesus and about salvation and how about Jesus loved them and could change their lives. The care was instantaneous through getting saved. Jesus cared about me. He cares about everybody else. And so I'm going to tell them. It wasn't so much me caring about them as much as me knowing that Jesus cared about them a lot. Mm-hmm. And because of what he did for me, it was only right that I should share this with other people. But the more deeper personal elements of discipleship, of wanting to see people reach their potential, because and I guess it's hard to articulate. It really is, because we're talking more about calling, and what that looks like, rather than character and those kinds of things, because none of that changed. The only thing that really changed is that I wasn't imposing on every man that came into church the need to preach. Mm-hmm. And just start to allow for people to come into the church who weren't called to preach. Is say, okay, well, find your place, and let God use your life. Still, obviously sharing testimony and wanting to see people come to Jesus and to have help people to get over that bridge, between them and God. But so it was never a thing of caring as much as being more empathetic, and more concerned about them reaching their potential. So what that enabled really was for me to be more successful at helping them, because I was now taking the time to find out where they were, rather than running 90 miles an hour and turning around and going, come on, let's go. It was more of a, okay, how fast can you run? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move from there. So that's really the difference. So it wasn't, I didn't care at all, and now I do, or anything like that.
So what would you say is, I was going to ask you, just along the lines of reward, I was going to ask, what do you think has been the most rewarding part of pastoring? But I guess I could just ask it like that. What do you, as opposed to, what have been the highlights of your pastorate in general? They're two kind of separate questions, but what is the most rewarding part? Yeah.
Well, what I've learned about human thinking, and realizing how incredible how we project the dark side of ourselves on other people. That's what we hate about other people. It's amazing to me how people can get the idea of somebody finding great joy out of sheer unrestricted power. And that somehow is the thing that brings joy out of, like if you're a CEO, I wish I was a CEO so I could tell people what to do, or I wish I was a pastor so that I could, get up there and, in the spotlight and people would look at me and call me pastor, and things like that. None of those things have any reward whatsoever. I mean, absolutely none, because the people that are giving you that, you learn that anybody who really genuinely gives you that kind of place, there's something not right about them. I mean, when they're, oh, yes, pastor, they're either trying to get something, trying to pull something, trying to get favor for themselves. I mean, there's so many factors that are involved in that those things are never, they're just not. There's nothing, anybody who could say, I'm satisfied. The reason why I became a pastor is so people could call me pastor, and that's what's satisfied my ego, or something like that. They're either really just not paying attention to how inauthentic that kind of thing is. Because the truth is that as a pastor, over the years, what I've realized is one of the things that I enjoy the most is people who aren't afraid of me. It's like you want to, hey, call somebody from the church, hey, can I speak to you for a second? And you just want to ask them out to dinner, and it's like, okay. And you think, nah, I don't want to go out to dinner with you. This is going to be too weird. I just want, just want fellowship, or you just want to, just find out, hey, how did your test go in school? And, oh, I thought you were going to tell me off for something, it's like, all the time. And it's like, this is so awkward, living like that. And then you get the people who accuse you of enjoying that kind of stuff. And it's like, if you only understood, and so you've got these groups of people that are really not, you're really not able to really even get to know, so, everybody needs people, and they need to have relationships with people. And going to England, for me, one of the exciting things about going to England was I was going to meet English people, not go there and be called pastor, it's like, that's just silly. But I would say probably the most rewarding things to me of pastoring is being able to see people become successful, see them reach their potential. And so that's like, I'd say that's not getting to the top. I honestly, okay, you want to play bare your soul thing, so I'll bare my soul. Okay, so for me personally, as not so much as a pastor, obviously in that capacity, I have that opportunity, but to be able to build a bond with somebody that's based on the fact that they have been able to get out of the orbit of disaster, have become successful, and have become partners in life with that element of, thank you for doing this for me, and I'm going to do my level best to do that for other people, because you did it for me. Being that kind of thing, for me, and that's a very rare thing to receive as a pastor. It's a very rare thing because so few people really do get how much they have been helped, by pastoral input in their lives. In our fellowship, we don't have like 100 staff pastors, in a church. It's really limited. Even our church in Tucson probably has 5 or so pastors. Yeah. And so people that are overcoming and doing well are often overcoming and doing well because of the input of one person. Somebody who's been there with them and just kind of walked them through some of the issues of life and have helped them to build a foundation and grow from there. And like for me, Pastor Warner is that pastor, and then there are a couple of other fellowship pastors, Paul Stevens and others who over the years, because they've been the assistant pastors, especially the assistant pastor. The assistant pastor is a fabulous position. I would love to be an assistant pastor because you get all the good stuff. You're not the one bringing the serious discipline on people, but at the same time you're really there to help people. And but so for me, that's the thing of building that life relationship. So when I see pastors like that, pastors who've had influence in my life, and I see them, and they they'll smile, they'll look at me and say, "Hey, Dave," and they know they've made an investment in my life. And my hope is that I express the fact that they made an investment in my life, because I've been on the other side of the fence, and realize how hard it is to be able to maintain relationships with people who that you've helped them, you've got them to where they are, but they don't know that. They, for some reason along the way, they thought they did it, and they didn't need any help. And it's like you see them and they're like, I don't know if I agree with this, and I don't know if I agree with that. And it's like, do you remember when you used to agree with me about everything? Do you remember what happened when we agreed? You remember how your life changed, and now all of a sudden you're plateaued, and you don't understand why that's happened? It's just simply a thing of thanksgiving, thankfulness or gratitude. And so for me, probably the most rewarding thing in life is people who I know they are grateful, and they have grown, and they have come into their own measure of success as a Christian, and we are life partners. There's a bond there because they know, they don't have to keep telling me, how much I help them and stuff like that. It just shows through conversations and how conversations go and things that are said that, and I'll hear them say something and it's something I taught them, and they say, I remember, you said this, and this is what I've been doing, and this is what I told these people, and, and that kind of a thing. Or they've just simply said it without giving me credit. And I think, I know where you got that from. You got that from me. And it's great. It's a great joy. It's a great joy to know that your life is having some sort of eternal impact on people. As something that we're going to share for all eternity, because we're going to heaven. And when we go to heaven, I'm not going to be Pastor Ford anymore. Yeah. And so those people, that are like that, we're not going to have a transition. There's not going to be a transition away from, Pastor Ford. It's just right. It's just right. I call Pastor Warner. In heaven, I won't call him Pastor Warner, but I'll still feel the same way about him. We'll still have the same relationship that we do right now. It won't be, oh yeah, yes, Pastor. It's not that kind of a thing. So for me, that's the most rewarding thing of it all. Is these around the world, just people around the world that I have these relationships with, that one day we're going to spend eternity together, and there will have been a camaraderie that has been established because they've gone on to do something for God with their lives.
What would you say is the biggest disappointment as a pastor? Not like maybe no, like the most disappointing thing.
I know what you mean. Yeah. I know what you mean. Heartbreaking is probably a better way of describing it. Yeah, I know what you're after. It is when people rebel. I don't think there's anything more heartbreaking than when people rebel. People who you've loved and you've invested your life in them, and they have chosen the path of rebellion, and really they're just. Really what they've done is they have chosen to go back into the world but don't want to admit it. That's usually where rebellion really comes from, is they want to go back into the world. Well, maybe not so much to go back into the world, but they want to try to reintegrate the old them with the new them. And so that they can be the mean, rotten individual but saved. And then I don't need you. I never needed you. You've been nothing to me, and they're really, really, mean. I mean, very, very mean. And, but for this period of time, they're practically, you're practically having to stop them from worshiping you. And then they all of a sudden turn around and they're like, you know what, you never helped me once. And as a matter of fact, my life's a mess because of you. And there's nothing, and that's probably the best way to describe it, as disappointing, because it's not, I know that's not true. And I'm not second guessing myself and thinking, wow, maybe I blew it here and maybe I should have been more like this. Cause I've learned over the years, people like that they are borderline psychopaths, and you can get drawn in by that. They're people that are consumed with themselves. They only think about themselves. And I won't be the only one that will experience that in their lives. They will do that with everybody who doesn't continue to facilitate their, psychosis. And so, but it is probably the most disappointing when people do that, and they decide that they're going to, go back to their ornery old self and claim Christianity at the same time.
So what, in terms of discipling, we've gone through kind of the things that have happened, and talking about the goal of disciple making, and going out and literally proselytizing and talking to people about Jesus, inviting them to become Christians, to become converts. And what would you say is like the way that, would you say you talk to like dozens or hundreds of people a year about Jesus? Like witness that many people. Yeah. So high numbers of people. What would you say is like the percentage of response? Just general response. People that's just we'll say like the threshold to show up to church.
Yeah. Well, I would okay. I think probably there's because I'm not sure where this line of questioning is going to lead, so I want to kind of stop it at the idea of, I don't measure things like that. I'm
going to ask you that question.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah. Okay,
but what would you say is like? What would you say? So.
Well, if you want to talk about just the dynamics, I would say 1 out of 100 or more.
And so you're talking about having, from the perspective of somebody having crossed the threshold, giving your life to Jesus. You you've experienced something that now you're turning around and you're saying everybody needs to experience this.
Yeah.
What is the thing that keeps people from that? And you're talking to people on the streets, and we have such a broad range of responses for everything from like, we love this to we absolutely hate what you're doing.
Yeah.
What do you think is that? What is the threshold that keeps people from crossing over?
Well, that was why I was saying about the idea of where you were going with the questions, because my initial thought was, when you become numbers oriented, and you've got to see a certain thing happen, you've kind of missed the plot, because these are people, we're dealing with people. And everybody's different, humans are humans, we are of the race of humans, and we are going to do things within the parameters of what humans do. In fact, I'm going to be talking about that idea, is that, we can, we're not as unique as we like to think we are from one another. But at the same time, people are at a different place. They've had different experiences in life. And so, I'm sympathetic towards the idea of people having an interest in God, but not having an interest in religion.
Yeah.
And so, I wish I could just, get people to just, believe me, but having had so many misfortunes with religion makes it difficult to believe anybody. I was handing some flyers out one day to a guy in a parking lot, and he just kind of waved me off. He goes, no. He said, I don't need any of that. I know all about church. And I said, this church is different. And he goes, yeah, that's what you all say. And I said, you're right. And I conceded that. I said, you're right. I said, we do all say that. And you're right. And I don't have any idea. And I told him, I said, I don't have any idea in 5 seconds how to convince you that our church is different. I'm just telling you, what happened to me. And I shared a little bit of my testimony. And he didn't blow me off. He listened to what I had to say, and he said, it's hard for me to accept that, because I know, everybody says, oh, this and that and the other thing, and then you get there and it's not what they've tried to describe to you. And so I'm appreciative of all that. So I know, and the truth of the matter is, it really is people becoming saved. It really does come down to there's a couple of factors there. You say, what is the threshold? I'll tell you basically what the threshold is that not a lot of people know a lot of people who aren't saved and deeply. And that is probably I would say probably the number one problem, is that people don't have relationships like they used to, not even among family members. COVID has even, destroyed that, in so many ways, that people are even more distant now than they've ever been. And so you have this group of people, humanity, that needs somebody close to them to tell them about Jesus, and they don't have one. They don't have anybody. There's nobody close. And so you've got this distance there. So we go out. I've the influence that my life has had has been, I would say, if I could just give percentages of influence, to give comparisons, these are not realistic numbers, but to just give you relative understanding, is that I've probably had a 70%, probably maybe a 90% impact on my family, in terms of the influence of Christianity and the that it's not just some stupid religion. 70% in work, maybe 50% amongst friends, and probably 5% or less amongst people who I don't know. Mm-hmm. Just simply because relationship is so much. The more you see somebody and the more you are a good Christian testimony, the more likely they are to get saved. It's just it's very rare that I have, and if I just kind of roll through in my mind of people that I've had a relationship for any longer than maybe 2 or 3 years that hasn't at least come to church, whether it's been on the job or friends, people that I've met, and built relationships with, maybe classes that I've taken or things like that, where there's any kind of development of a relationship that there hasn't been some kind of I will at least come to your church and see what this is all about kind of thing. And so, I'm always trying to come up with creative ways to try to figure out how to get close to people that I don't know. I'm not talking about friendship evangelism. You be 3,000 years before we'd reach 10 people. But the idea of trying to quickly get a relationship going with people, meet them, talk with them, bare my soul to them, and hopefully, be able to accelerate the building of a relationship. After 2 or 3 or 4 meetings, we've known each other all of our lives. So I think that's the issue. What you're talking about when you talk about threshold is really that issue, is the idea of relationship, and somebody who's been able to open up, and because if you look at people who've gotten saved in our church, that's been the thing. There's always been some kinds of, there's been relationships there already, sometimes pre-existing relationships that have caused people to walk in. When I first got here, Joe, already had, you didn't know me, but you knew around me, and so you guys getting saved wasn't, Joe was already familiar with Christianity and had family who was saved, and we connected. As soon as he came into the church, it was quite interesting because we connected, and I have a feeling that some of that connection was a similarity in thought process. We're both more, mechanical in our thinking, not emotional. And so that kind of bridged a gap right away. Not to mention the more practical aspects of, I'm going to go to hell for all eternity, and so there's that's what I'm saying. So there's these issues really are bonds, the building of bonds, relationships, and so I think that's a lot of the struggle, is that people are not as inclined to bare their soul anymore, and build relationships. And so consequently, I think that there's a direct relationship between that, because it's true even in trying to help people to find their purpose in God, is that they just don't want people to know the problems they have. Is when I was in England, I had that issue, the English stiff upper lip kind of thinking, is we don't share our problems. And a couple in the church, which were very instrumental in the church even being there in the first place, they were having troubles in their family, but it was like, no, we don't talk about our family problems. We'll come to church, we'll serve God, we'll worship, we'll, be involved, we'll help other people, but no, you're not going to know about our problems. We're not going to bring our problems to you. We're not going to burden the church or burden you with our problems. These are things we need to sort out. And I had to tell them that's the whole point. The whole point is that we help each other. And then once they finally opened up, then all of a sudden everything changed for the church, them, all the dynamics of things changed, because they finally got the revelation that, hey, this is, salvation isn't about, people becoming sinless, and having no problems anymore. It's like, no, let's work through them. There was exposure, and dealing with issues, but that's part of it. You don't grow without that. So that's, I think, a lot of the issue of what you're calling threshold is really that, is the ability to trust. Okay, maybe Jesus is real, but here in this church with these people in this situations, it can be a whole nother thing.
Mm-hmm. So I want to go back to that idea of relationship, but because I'd actually had the question down and you actually mentioned it, so we'll jump at it real quick. But the idea of measuring success. If I work in the corporate world and have, this is my second, I should say, corporation that I've worked for. I was raised in the trades, and so very different. You build your own business, and it's a lot easier to build a business with something that's already in existence, and just you work in the competition, you market your own brand, stuff like that. There's a lot different dynamic there because there's already an existing market. But In the last 2 companies I've worked for, for the first one, there is no market. The second one that I'm working in now, there is a market, but it's very small. Or I should say the market is big, the product is very small.
Right.
And so very little competition. But it's interesting because when you're trying to do something, and I can say some of this stuff because our company just came out of stealth, so I'm not giving any proprietary information away, and I'm not going to get in trouble for this, but trying to build a product that already exists, but you're making it better.
Yeah.
And you have private investors who have put a ton of money. We saw a list last week, right when we came out of stealth. We are the number one invested company in renewable energy in the United States. We have the most funding out of any other company.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because how much money is put into something that is for all intents and purposes based on faith. You guys are going to get this done, X, Y, and Z done by X date.
Yeah.
And if it's not done, we'll talk then.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because you measure success.
Yeah.
You have a measurement for success. You have a line. If you don't cross that line, you're done. But in church, it's a lot different. And in Christianity, it's a lot different. How do you measure success? And what do you what are you gauging things off of? What, in other words, what's drawing the line?
Yeah.
Or who?
Yeah. They're not dissimilar. Because it is grow or die, in a church. You don't have the luxury of just meandering through life. Christianity is not coming to a place to where now I'm a Christian, life doesn't really matter anymore. What I do isn't really important because I'm going to go to heaven for all eternity. It's a misnomer that many people believe is the case. And so they just become useless, lazy people and somehow figure that God's pleased with all that. And I'm not, a lot of that comes from some things that, how we're raised, over the years of just, Christianity in America is all about, how much Jesus loves us, has nothing to do with us loving Jesus. And, you might hear 500 people say Jesus loves me, and out of those 500, you may hear one that says, "And I love Jesus." It's not very fairly distributed. So measuring as a Christian, people fall on the extremes of this. Is that Christianity becomes by merit. You're meriting God's love by your success, which is one extreme. It's becomes salvation by works. God's pleased with me when I'm having influence on people. But then the other one is the opposite side, which is that there's no responsibility whatsoever. And Jesus loves me no matter what I do. And so you have a lot of people fall into these extremes, but the real balance is that Jesus does love us, but he wants us to be productive. That was the whole point. He tells his disciples, if you're following me, then you will be fruitful. You will bear fruit. People will be influenced. You are the light of the world, and a city on a hill can't be hid, and you're the salt of the earth. And, so many things that he was teaching his disciples about, okay, I've saved you, but I haven't just saved you just so you can be saved. I've saved you for a purpose. I've saved you and I've called you. And Paul even says that we're saved and called with a holy calling. There are people that are saved, and hey, I'm saved. That's all that matters. I'm saved. And then you've got people, the only way I could describe it is that they're called. I've got to do something for God. That's all there is to it. I'm a miserable, worthless piece of crap if I don't do something for God. I'm called. I got to be fruitful. I got to win souls. I got to do this. But we're supposed to be saved and called.
Yeah.
And so that's the real balance. And so success, the measurement of a church, in terms of success really is not how much it's growing, but is it growing? Is it growing? Are the people in the church having influence? It's not are 5 people a week getting saved. It's are you having influence? Is your life, having impact? Are people getting saved? Is your life causing a momentum that anybody who comes into your orbit begins to get caught up in that momentum to move towards salvation, or are there people, it's interesting to me, you have to balance this, but it's interesting to me how that there are people that are rebels that are comfortable being with people from church. I mean, like nothing ever happened, it's one thing to love people and to leave room for people to repent, but it's another thing when those people are able to feel comfortable and like nothing's changed, that if they walked in the door tomorrow and that it would be like they never left, even if they're not repentant.
Mm-hmm.
They can just come back and everything's fine. Not there's not that sense of this, you can't live like this, and so in the church there should be that balance of love and devotion to Jesus, so it's a love that we share with one another, but also a devotion to Jesus, that when so that people when they come in here, this is like a sanctuary for people who want help, not just a warehouse for rejects from society.
Yeah.
And so that's the so the growth of a church really is that, year upon year there should be, the impact level. So maybe the area, and this is a thing I think is interesting, especially for our church where we are in the area we're in, is we have such tremendous opportunity to be able to have influence and impact, and there's plenty of people in the church that could do that. That they could be involved with that impact. The issue is really getting that momentum going. To where people are like, what, I want to be fruitful. I want to have impact. I want my life to reach other people, and that where that becomes the habit of their lives. Not just once a month or outreach or whatever, but that this is a great opportunity. We're in a city with people that we talk to all the time that are open. And so we talk to them on Friday. That shouldn't be the only time we talk to them. I mean, we should be texting them and calling them and, trying to get them to come to church. I mean, once we've gotten a contact with these people, we should be trying to reach in. Hey, let's get together. Let's, go out to dinner, have coffee, whatever. So what do you think? Talking to people, with there should be some kind of hunger to want to see those people that we talk to be, to become something more, not just simply talk to them on Friday night, handing out flyers and then hope somehow that does something. Because the discipleship really is an investing of your life into another person's life. And so that kind of a thing. And then there should be a momentum, that grows, and that's, I think, the thing that's the most difficult for people to understand is that there are dynamics that create momentum. And like I said, it's not, are there 5 or 6 or 10 people a week coming into the church? It's not, looking at this particular number. It's just what's the influence level like? How much influence is there? Cross influence as well. I mean, it's not in a competitive way. Somebody comes into church that somebody else invited, and by the end of the service, they've met 2 or 3 more people, who are now at the same level, so now it's not just 2 people that know each other, it's 5 people who know each other, and then from there, hey, let's get together, so the 5 of them get together, and so that kind of a thing. So just simple dynamics of that bring influence.
So how would you break, going back to the issue of relationship, how would you kind of not break, but cross the bridge of that relational gap? Like how do you really get people to, if you were talking to somebody right now that was listening and they're listening like, yeah, you're right, I believe in God, I'm interested in this idea of becoming a Christian, but I don't trust anybody.
Yeah.
How do you cross that bridge with people? What would you tell somebody if you had a little bit more than 5 seconds to convince them?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't tell them something in particular. I think that's the most important thing. I wouldn't have a line, I think probably one of the most important things when it comes to this issue of influence is learning how to listen. more than anything else, being able to listen and to hear where people are, and to hear the things that maybe they're not saying. They might be saying stuff and it sounds bad, it sounds negative, but they may be saying that because of something else, So what's, being able to find that deeper motivation, of that kind of thing, because I'm always looking, people who, they say they're going to come to a service and then they don't come. It's like, well, why didn't they come?
Mm-hmm.
What was the reason why, and not why didn't you come? You should have been here, but genuinely, where do I need to build a bridge? Because people will go to things they want to go to, but they may not want to go to things, it's like that t-shirt, I'm sorry I'm late, I don't want to come.
Yeah.
And that's often, people, oh yeah, I didn't come Sunday because and fill in the gap, with fill in the blank with whatever, they're going to just tell you what you want to hear. So you're not offended, but it could be, I don't want to go because I don't want to sit there and listen to a sermon and their idea of what church is like, with having never been to a service like ours, or maybe there are things about our service they just plain don't like, it's just not, people come in and everybody here is clapping. I see people, and it's fun for me. It's kind of funny because I'll see people. They'll come in and they can stand stone motionless. I mean, just stone motionless.
Yeah.
And I think, they're like this. Here's everybody singing and clapping, and they're just standing there, and it's like. But it could be two things. It could be, one, is they're resisting what's going on, or two, they just plain aren't interested in music, or musical things. Maybe I don't know, they're more into sports than music or something like that. They're just not into it. And so, but you got to find out what it is. Why are they so up? It's like they're almost uptight. And some people are just not into it. They're just not into singing and dancing and clapping. And so it's like, well, there's something in there, that's a blockage, because that's not, God created us to sing and clap and to give worship to him. God created us. So there's something's happened to that person. This is a damage area of their lives. And so, what is it? How do you get to it? How can you find out what that area is? What is it that they're, but until you can get people to open up, about anything, you may never be able to reach that thing. And so people can come for, and this has always been kind of my personal concern, is that as the pastor, you can't, just jump into everybody's life, uninvited. Somebody brings somebody to church. Well, there must have been something there that connected those two people. So in a lot of ways, that person's going to need to be the one to try to, go a little deeper with this and find out what the situation is, and dealing with that, with rather than, could you imagine, I come down from the platform and say, hey, I was watching you during the service and noticed that, you're just sitting in your seat and you're not singing or dancing, clapping or nothing. What's wrong with you? Is there anything I can do to help you? How do you say that without putting them on the spot? And so, until you, get to know them and maybe, have spent some time with them. And like I said, the pastor can't do that with every single person, and so, but I think that's, so it's not a thing that you say as much as just having a hunger and praying and saying, God, help me to help them. I think more than anything else, help me to be able to get inside, and try to get in, I call it getting into their head, because I think that's a thing that there's a real art to that, is being able to get inside of people's heads. Some people don't want you in there.
Yeah.
And so being able to do that, a lot of times the reason they don't want you in there is because they're afraid you're going to hurt them, and that's legitimate because they've been hurt in the past, and sometimes people have been traumatized. You just have no idea what's going on in people. You think, man, I can't, I'd always, when I was in England, there was a girl who, she would say to me, I just don't understand why these people don't just get saved. And I was like, speak for yourself. You were a pain in the neck. It took all kinds of work to get you. It's like she forgot.
Yeah.
And so everybody has their things, and so it's being patient and asking God to help you to get inside of people, and when you can learn how to do that, it's like, again, going back to the rewarding thing, is there's just such a reward when you can get inside and people begin to trust you, and then you can begin to help them. And it's not you just getting in there and swinging a hammer, but you getting in there and being able to help them to rebuild their lives.
Okay, last question. I know we're at 8:00, but
are we? God, that was super fast.
That was really fast. So I was going to ask what the job of a pastor is, but what would you say is your aim? Stepping outside the stereotype. What is your aim as a pastor?
My aim as a pastor, the reason why I say outside the stereotype is because I don't even know what the stereotype is. But
that's for the person listening.
Well, I don't even know what would be a stereotype. That's what I'm saying is that, pastoring is like, I don't think there's even a handbook. I don't think there's one. I'm sure there's a bunch. Or, here's how to be a pastor. There's nothing. So ask your question again.
What is your aim?
My aim. Okay, my aim. Yeah, my aim really is, okay, so, and I'm going to zoom out a bit on this. My aim is to go beyond just what's happening inside the church. It's the whole, the city, the whole surrounding area of the church where the church can have impact and here I feel that's multi-city. We can stretch all the way into San Mateo, San Bruno. I mean, there's no South San Francisco. We can just keep going. I mean, there's no boundaries because people commute between San Jose and San Francisco. And as far as I'm concerned, we could have influence all through there, but the idea really, and my kind of aim is to try to build I'm trying to think of there was I don't want to live, what was it, the poem, I don't want to live within the sound of chapel bells. I want to set up a rescue mission 3 feet from hell or something like that.
Okay.
It's that
I know
kind
what
of,
you're talking about.
that kind of, that's really where I want to be. Is I want our church to be so close to the world that the world gets nervous. That if that makes any sense, because I'm not talking about being worldly, and the church being worldly, but being able to be so close to the world and be able to bridge the gaps between the world and the church to such a degree that there's an easy path for people to come into salvation. Because I know personally that as a sinner in my own life, sin is a hard taskmaster. When I had no idea of God, and so the only thing I had to reference off of was the world and sin. And it didn't matter whether it was chasing money or chasing girls. It didn't make any difference. It was all chasing the wind. None of it brought any kind of satisfaction or peace or anything. And so to be able to create an environment to where people can see, number one, that they can see we're not some exclusive club, which is how I see most religion, is we're not some exclusive club of people that think that we're the elite of the world. But at the same time, I want to have something that when people come into our church, they realize, what, these people genuinely care about people. They genuinely care about people. They love people. They may have a whole different way of living. They may have a whole set of standards that are completely different from living, but they love people. They care about people, and they want to see people the best for people. And that's kind of my my aim, for our church, and that's what we are as disciples, is to do that and then reproduce that worldwide, to be able to do that, not just here, and that's, if there's anything that's a frustration for me is that idea that, just establishing that has been hard enough, but there's a whole world of people that need that, they need what we have, and just to get a momentum going in that way is probably the most important thing to me.
Awesome. All right. That's it for tonight. We will have this again next week. But just to let those of you who don't already know about it, we have a service every Wednesday night in person. You can come. We will be here. Pastor Ford preaches. We have the doors open an hour early, and so you can come tomorrow. That's at 7:00. And we're located at 1100 Industrial Road in San Carlos. We're Suite 10, and we invite you to join us. We'd love for you to come and be a part of the service. You can come dressed, as long as you're dressed. You can dress however you want, and you can join us in person. This isn't exclusively online. We've kind of passed that a while back, and so we invite you to come in person, join us. That's tomorrow at 7:00. And again, more information online. Visit our website, visit our YouTube page. Tons of info, tons of content, and we look forward to seeing you soon.